Hey, Read Through the Word. Today is August 23rd, and today's lesson is called Monuments to God. Here we are in Ezekiel, where Ezekiel is having this discussion about messages for Egypt and all of these others for many different nations. So if you read, you see God's message to this nation, God's message to this nation. So that's where we are in our reading. And you get what I mentioned the other day, the sad object lesson that Ezekiel has to deal with as well is the death of his wife. So where we're looking today is Ezekiel chapter 30, verse 26. That says this: I will scatter the Egyptians among the nations, dispersing them throughout the earth. Then they will know that I am the Lord. We saw that phrase a lot in the book of Exodus. And I said, notice this, that was a big phrase I wanted you to. But I want us to see that today. I should have grabbed my glasses. My hair keeps getting in my eye. It's itching. I should have grabbed my glasses because we're going to be doing some what I call Bible Olympics today. And there's so many. This is one of, I say this a lot. There's so many of these lessons that if I had you in the room with me, I would love to do it. Now, this is one of those lessons where I would need a map or a couple, some timelines and a couple of whiteboards and all different color markers, and we would have some fun because I want us to see something. And so let's look at what's going on here. So God has messages for many nations, and I think I talked about this last year because it sounded really familiar to me because I would have been putting a map there, and then I think we would have talked about all the nations surrounding. So what he's doing is God has message for the judgment and destruction of all of these nations that surrounded Israel. So like Moab and Ammon and Egypt and Syria. So you see all of these things occurring. But what I want us to see is he has these messages, and he reminds all of these people, and he reminds us that he is in control. So what I want us to look at is the major history lesson of the world, like all of history. And have we, as followers of Christ, put things in their proper perspective about everything? So that's where we're going with this. And I want us to talk about, as citizens of this world, the past week has been really hard. This pandemic that we have won't go away. It keeps coming. And Wendy and I have both been dealing with family members and extended family with that. And I had a dear friend of mine lose someone really quickly. So we've got that. We've got, as the world watches everything that is occurring in Afghanistan over the past week, anyway, that's a longer story than we have time. But as we watch all of these things being here together, I think this is a moment to just try to put some perspective on and remind us who we are as children of God, who he is as in King of the world, and what he's doing. So that's what I want us to see through this Ezekiel and all of these, that what God's doing. So today's the major world history lesson. We'd have a map. It'd be wonderful. But we're doing this through here together. So I want us to look at a few things. The first thing, I don't even think, let's start with this one. So we're going to be in a few different places in the Bible. I want us right now to go to Acts chapter 17. And if you've been around here for a while, I share this verse a lot. Actually, in my classroom, if I'm teaching history, this is the verse you memorize. It says this. We are in Acts chapter 17. Let's see, verse 26 says this, and he made from one man every nation of mankind to live on the face of the earth, having determined allotted periods and boundaries of their dwelling places, that they should seek God in the hope that they might feel their way toward him and find him. It says, yet he's not far from us. So this is the end of Paul's discussion with the philosophers in Athens, and it's a great perspective of what God has made all of history, all of time, all the people, all the places, what he's doing. So that's the first verse. The next one is, so that's all of us included. So the next one I want you to look at is in Ephesians 1, verse, oh, man, you just want to read the whole thing. Let's just look at verse 11. It says, in him we have obtained an inheritance, having been predestined according to the purpose of him who works all things according to the counsel of his will. There are no mistakes by God. He has determined, he has predestined, he has, and for a purpose. So let's look at that. 2 Peter 3, 1 through 6. Okay, it says this. This is now the second letter I'm writing to you, beloved. In both of them, I'm stirring up your sincere minds by way of reminder that you should remember the predictions of the holy prophets and the commandment of the Lord and Savior through your apostles, knowing this, first of all, the scoffers will come in the last days with scoffing, following their own sinful desires. And they will say, where's the promise of his coming? For ever since the fathers fell asleep, all things are continuing as they were from the beginning of creation. For they deliberately overlook this fact, that the heavens existed long ago, and the earth was formed out of water and through water by the word of God, and that by means of these the world had then existed, was deluged with water and perished. That there is no idea of history that does not involve God. Now, during the Enlightenment stage, 1700s, you would have had people who would describe them as themselves as deists. Yes, there's a God, and they call him like the idea of the watchmaker. He made the watch, he started running, he stepped back, and he never stepped into time and never had anything to do with it. He just so that's their idea of God. But God tells us in his word totally different things of how he works and how. So I want you to see this, that God, what these verses all are telling us is that God has moved and is constantly moving for this idea of predestined. What that means is this, that he is moving his creation toward the conclusion of the purpose that he has determined from the beginning. There is a reason for everything. That doesn't mean we will know what that is. But I want you to see that all of history and everything that exists in the world today are all monuments to God and his power. So let's take a march through history for a minute. And we're going to look at, if you knew anything about ancient civilizations and you thought about those, the first thing you would ever learn about are the Mesopotamian cultures, Sumerians, cuneiform, all of those type of things. Now, we meet a man in the Bible who grew up in all of that in a town called Ur, which was like the capital of the Mesopotamian civilization. And his name was Abram, and he was brought out. So you will see God bring out, we're told the story of Abram to give us the record of the Jewish nation. Remembering that that God's given us small amounts. There are other things going on in the world at the time. But if you were to watch that and watch the rise and the fall of the Mesopotamian culture, what you'll see is that what will happen is all those people in the Mesopotamian will make a journey much like that of Abraham, and they will go and become what are called the Amorite people groups. So, all right, you've already seen a monument to God by the rise and the fall of the Mesopotamian culture. It's a monument to God and what he will do. How is this different from what we would see from a worldly perspective of history? In that, here's why he's God. The bad things that people do, God can turn and make to good. So there's a history, there's a story. The Bible is going to record all of these movements throughout the ancient world and ancient history. So the next rise and fall you'll see is Exodus. Is Egypt. And we see that in the book of Exodus. Did you see monuments today, the pyramids that still exist, that give voice, that give witness to the battle between God and the gods of Egypt, and that they may know that he is God. They still stand today as a monument to the power of God and what he will do through history and what all we're headed towards. We're headed towards, he's king of the world. We're headed towards everything will fall but him. So then you trace the rise and fall of Egypt. Then the next thing you'll do is you'll go back up and you'll trace the rise and fall of the Assyrian Empire, which we have seen through the nation of Israel. You see that through Jonah. You'll see it through Nahum. Nahum, you see the final destruction of the Assyrian Empire. So we watch that. We see all of that stands as monuments to God, in that they don't realize they're monuments to God. But all of those are showing how God works through and with people throughout time for his purposes. All of this is headed towards his purpose. So you see the rise, the fall of the Assyrian Empire. The next thing you'll see on the world stage is the rise, the fall of the Babylonian Empire. You see Nebuchadnezzar. You still see everything that existed during the Babylon. You see, actually in the 20th century, Saddam Hussein tried to recreate everything Nebuchadnezzar had done in Baghdad. And so you see replicas of much of what Nebuchadnezzar, even as far as the bricks, Nebuchadnezzar had his name put on every brick that was built, everything he built, like the Ishtar Gate, all of these things. When Hussein rebuilds them, he does the same thing and puts his name on them, thinking these are monuments to Nebuchadnezzar, monuments to Hussein, but these are the monuments that shows that God is in control of the world and that he rises and lets nations fall for his purpose, and he will use. So you see that. Then the next thing that comes into the world stage are the Persians, and the Persians come on the stage. We haven't got there yet. They'll be coming up soon. And then you see all of that. And then after the Persians, think of the Battle of Thermopylae and the ancient The next ancient power that will come on the world is Greece. And you see that one, which we just read with Acts. Acts chapter 17, you're in the middle of all those Greek thinkers and the world that Alexander the Great had created. Because God had a purpose for all of that. Then the next thing you see is what Galatians tells us, the fullness of time, that the next world power on stage will be Rome. And Rome is brought to power at the perfect place, in the perfect, there is no mistake for where the nation of Israel is, and that they've been sent away and are going to be sent back to it, and that they've been purposely put where they are. That the rise and fall and the march of history goes right through that little time, that little strip of land in the Middle East. And that in the fullness of time, God brings the Roman Empire for the purpose of two things: the Roman road and the Roman cross. That what we see is all of these things we look at is history. These are monuments. Monuments. We think they're monuments to ancient cultures. They're monuments to God, to show He is in control. He has a plan. He knows that plan. And we should know by looking through His Word that He is in control. And that He has a part for us in His plan to share the gospel with people so that they too can know not the kings of Egypt, the kings of Rome, the kings of Greece, but they can know the King of the world. And oh my goodness, we could talk for hours on this. He is good, He is in control, and I trust Him. We'll see you next time on Read Through the Word.